This is paired with Mr. Turner getting into a bike accident, which is a major shakeup to the newfound stability that Shawn had been enjoying all season. But even with that stability, Shawn has yet to find a true direction for his future, which is why episodes like this and Easy Street were important. This would also mark the last appearance of Mr. Turner on the show, and it's interesting how his final mark would be paralleled to an extent by a major Season 6 event, but that's a topic for a future review. And of course, no Boy Meets World season would feel complete without the myriad of ways Cory and Topanga develop as a couple. As we know, they were broken up for a time before they got back together in Season 3. Season 4 is kind of a rare instance where both are going steady throughout the entire season, and don't face a potentially relationship-ending confrontation until next season when the cast heads up to the old ski lodge. What I like about that choice in this season is how it allows for the pair to discuss advancing their relationship, since the only thing tearing them apart is Pittsburgh about midway through. And by advancing, yes, I do mean that Cory implies, and sometimes not very subtly, that he and Topanga should be sexually active. Obviously not something Topanga is very gung-ho about, but I appreciate their ability to discuss the matter in a somewhat mature way, or at least as mature as you'd expect from a cast that's still in high school at the end of the day. And while Cory is at times frustrated with Topanga's attitude towards sex, he never goes so far as to force anything or make Topanga uncomfortable with it, which makes sense for Cory's character, but is also just a beautiful perspective for literally all of humanity to adopt. Even if you've been together for seemingly forever, about love and the strength thereof, and I even like the volatility of it all, because in a situation this emotional, rationality becomes more scarce. What I didn't like as much is how everything resolved pretty easily. It's a two-parter where Topanga leaves and then comes back because her aunt just so happens to live in the area and agree with the living arrangement. I felt that maybe we could have had something even more impactful if Topanga and Cory had to really do the long-distance thing for a bit longer before realizing the truth behind all the stuff Amy was talking about. And then, once things got exceptionally hard a couple of episodes later, then have Topanga run away and resolve the situation using her aunt. The two-parter was a moving and emotionally investing arc, where so many characters with so many perspectives had so much insight to give, and all of that works very well here, but I just had some issues with the mechanics behind it all. The other interesting thing about Season 4, beyond strictly the character development side of things, is how much of it focused more on ideas than it did on emphasizing the general themes were great ones that allowed the cast to work with the larger idea of learning more deeply about and understanding different perspectives. Previous seasons have done this to great effect before, especially in Season 1, but I think Season 4 is maybe the best example of taking important ideas and allowing them to play out in a single episode. There are singular episodes that are better in later seasons, but as a collective of single-minded episodes, I would argue that Season 4 stands above the others as far as the overall quality of that specific category goes. The 5 episodes I would consider the best from Season 4 in order from 5 to 1 are Along Walk to Pittsburgh Part 1, Shake Like Me, Uncle Daddy, You Can Go Home Again, and Cult Fiction, with 2 honorable mentions given to Janitor Dad for advancing the long estranged Chet Hunt tapping off the season in a way that directly connects with what Eric was struggling with at the very beginning of the season. Picking out a top 5 for this season was the hardest yet, because there's just so many great ones to choose from that either have something important to say or build the season's narrative through the characters. All in all, both Season 3 and 4 are bound together in such interesting ways, and a lot of that has to do with Eric Matthews. His college years would do less in the way of developing him, but the things both of these seasons accomplished with his character already set into motion by a singular but exceptionally important Season 2 episode have taken him to all manner of places, both physically and mentally. But, in the end, through the Feeney call, his family, and a couple of supporting characters, he finds his way. Boy Meets World is a coming-of-age story, and while that places a lot of focus on Shawn, Corey, and Topanga growing up, Season 4 works with what Season 3 started to also offer a brilliant coming-of-age story for Eric as well before he settles into college. But he's definitely not alone in carrying the season, because the way that it successfully continues on from Season 3 also applies to Shawn and the several choice episodes that revolve around him and his family coming back together piece by piece. Also, in terms of writing, concepts, execution of ideas, and the way character relationships are developed and advanced, Season 4 is spectacular. Most of the more novel episodes deliver, and the more familiar topics are expertly developed from major points of previous seasons. For me, now that said, let's jump back into Boy Meets World and review Season 5. One of the major points of emphasis in seasons past was centralized development. What I mean by that is that the characters that were already there, or have been there, add the most to the development of the main characters and help them along the way. Mr. Feeney develops a mentor relationship with Eric, which in turn helps Eric mature. Shawn has an ever-changing relationship with both his father and Mr. Turner, which in turn affects his outlook on life. And Cory alongside Topanga change as their relationship goes through different hurdles. But Season 5, relatively speaking, is built more on the introduction of completely new characters and how those characters will go on to affect the ones we already know. The first example of the Season 5 trait is the introduction of Shawn's half-brother, Jack Hunter. Jack is an interesting character. He's framed as nice but somewhat unassertive, since he'll just put up with most of Eric's crazy antics, but not when it comes to Shawn. He wants them to have a real relationship, but Shawn is opposed because Jack represents the wealth that Shawn never had. This is a major point for both characters because Shawn used to be the kind of guy that put family on a very high pedestal, and still does to a degree, despite everything his parents put him through. But because Jack is a metaphor for the life Shawn never got to live, it creates the proverbial line in the sand. It really creates an interesting dynamic, because Jack wants to look out for his little brother, but Shawn has always been more independent, and thinks of Jack's help more as a handout. But even with the brothers Hunter eventually coming to an understanding, and even living together later on, an even larger part of Shawn's development in this season has to belong to another new addition. Angela Moore proves to be a great character and a valuable one over the last 3 seasons of the show, both in her own right and how her inclusion shapes Shawn. Although I did feel that more should have been done to touch upon the racial diversity that she represents. After all, the socioeconomic diversity that defines the Hunters and the Matthews was utilized a lot, and it added a lot of perspective to the series. In any case, Shawn ends up developing feelings for her, a story we've heard 100 times before, but it soon becomes clear that something is different this time. Corey tries to convince Shawn to commit to a long-term relationship with Angela, but things on that end don't work out so well to start, but eventually leads to them realizing that their feelings for each other are real and powerful. Those feelings are tested in one of Season 5's most definitive episodes, If You Can't Be With the One You Love. This episode introduced a major issue of underage drinking in the aftermath of another Corey and Topanga breakup. Corey gets a reputation for being a buzzkill and tries to use alcohol to subvert that identity. It works to a degree, but it obviously doesn't go over well with Topanga. What complicates matters is when Shawn is convinced to partake in the drinking as well, but he takes it a little further. He and Angela get into an argument. Shawn lost control for a split second, and he put his hands on her in a very regrettable way. Then it all really comes together when Shawn learns from Jack that Chet's drinking problem led to Jack's mother leaving him. The 2 most important new characters of the season end up being the ones that force Shawn to reevaluate the man he wants to be. The idea of Shawn trying to separate his own identity from his father's sets up maybe the most emotionally potent moment of the series in Season 6. To backtrack a bit, this exceptional episode regarding underage drinking was in part created by the inciting incident of Corey and Topanga having broken up about midway through the season. Why, you may ask? Once again, we find ourselves at the infamous Ski Lodge, a place I mentioned often during and leading up to the Girl Meets World episode of the same name. And in comes Lauren, another new character that ends up playing a sizable role in the show, even with limited screen time compared to Jack or Angela. The character of Lauren herself is kind of ideal when you think about it, and that's the whole point. Because Corey never gave any serious thoughts to other women once he and Topanga became official. A couple of bumps in the road, yes, but nothing like Lauren, who connects with Corey in ways he never thought possible. After they leave the lodge, this saga continues into the next 2 episodes, as Topanga eventually reads a letter from Lauren. Corey then decides to go on a real date with Lauren, thanks in part to some motherly advice, and decides that he cannot live without Topanga. Topanga decides to break up with him then and there, and the reasons this time are a bit more complicated, and it's genuinely difficult to discern which of the 2 is more in the right. Topanga does have a point in how she never had to test her feelings, but Corey also kind of has a point, especially since nothing he did with Lauren would be considered crossing the line. This complication is resolved by having a similar situation happen, but in reverse with the episode Starry Night, where Topanga decides to try going out with a guy named Ricky Ferris. And even though Topanga and him connect in a number of ways, the situation provides a revelation for Topanga that she too still loves Corey, thus poetically resolving their relationship drama leading up to prom and then graduation, where sexual relations are considered, but both decide to wait. And then at graduation itself, Topanga proposes to Corey, and the season ends on a cliffhanger. There's not too much in the way of major development or involvement from Eric, Feeney, or the other supporting characters versus seasons past, outside of a handful of singular episodes, some of which are good and others a little less so. But seeing Sabrina and Salem cross over, even for just a few seconds each, was awesome. Although I am left wishing that those episodes placed a bit more focus on those 2 specifically. The 5 episodes I would consider the best from Season 5, in order from 5 to 1, are I Love You, Donna Karen, Brothers, Heartbreak Corey, Torn Between Two Lovers, and If You Can't Be With the One You Love, with 2 honorable mentions going to promises interestingly tied to the previous 2. A lot of that has to do with Eric as a character already having gone through a major arc in both of the previous seasons, and thus being allowed to settle down a little bit and re-embrace his insanity now that he's in college. However, episodes like Torn Between Two Lovers showcase how Eric can balance his crazy side with his desire to help people, something that ends up defining his chosen career path later on. So even though he doesn't get as much focus here, his development is far from wasted and expresses itself in more subtle ways over the course of this season and the last 2. But the actual focus of this season is being able to grow up and create stories that embrace more mature coming-of-age topics, something Girl Meets World has yet to consistently convey so far in Season 3. The episodes that tackle those topics prove to be the best in the season and provide some of the best moments of this series, but it is a little sparse. It feels like for every one of those episodes, there's an episode thrown in there that doesn't really matter too much, or episodes like Honesty Night, which are just kind of extraneous. With Season 5 more than most seasons, you get some great peaks and some low valleys, but the low points didn't even feel consistent in tone, so they weren't just lacking, they felt like they came out of nowhere. In some cases, I really didn't mind, since we did probably have Season 5 beat. Still, a pretty good season, but not all good all of the time, and relatively inconsistent in pushing its particular narrative forward. But as rough as it was to see Shawn drunk and Corey alone, nothing, and I mean nothing, hits harder than the emotional freight train that Season 6 proved.